Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. I suspect most listeners have found that adventure has changed their life, leading to more happiness, better health, and stronger relationships. But our guest today really had his life changed by his love of the outdoors. Today we are talking with Alex Denk, who turned a 7,000 kilometer walk across Europe into a full-time job. Hi Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Richard, thanks for having me.
I'm super excited. I started watching your videos on YouTube a few weeks ago and was just really captivated by kind of how your life has evolved and the trips you've done. And I want to talk about the trip you did in 2018 where you walked across Europe. But before we get into that, can you maybe tell the listeners how you got started as a walker?
Starting as a walker, I think I was quite a lot in the mountains with my parents, but then I kind of lost it during puberty, like many people can relate maybe. And then I like the story is kind of classic heartbroken story. I just had my first girlfriend breaking up, and then I thought, okay, I have to do something for myself. First time doing an adventure for myself. So I remembered that I had to read a book in school about the Camino in Europe, like the Camino de Santiago, walking through Spain to Santiago de Compostela. And I didn't really know anything about long distance hiking or hiking in general, I'd say. So at one point I just said, okay, let's just try it. Just walking sounds good, getting your head free. And then I booked the flight, read a bit into walking outdoors, and had a way too heavy backpack in the end, and hiked, I think it was 500 or 600 kilometers through Spain. And that, kind of got me really hooked on the entire thing.
I swear the Camino is like a gateway drug to hiking and the love of outdoors. There's so many people I've met that never were interested in the outdoors at all, and again, for some reason, they'd lost someone they cared about, or a breakup, or just kind of, they wanted something different in their life. They decide to go on a pilgrimage, and they spend the rest of their life every year or two going on a big walk, and they just fall in love with the outdoors, just that one walk.
Yeah, it's weird, but I think it's quite a classic story, as you said. There's a lot of people going the same way.
So a few years later, you decided you wanted to do this massive walk all the way around Europe. Originally, 9,000 kilometers was the goal. What led you to wanting to do this massive walk?
I think after the Camino, I really got hooked. So I spent most of my vacations going long distance hiking, getting more into packing, into gear, into all the stuff. So I also watched a lot of YouTube videos about gear and hikes, and then I ended up finding some YouTube videos about PCT and CDT and the long distance trail community in the US. I thought, oh, that sounds so nice, but it would be kind of cool to do it in Europe as well. And I didn't really know so much about the hiking community in Europe, and I think it's a way different level than in the US. So I think I looked into what is possible and what I like to do. So the original plan was to go from my hometown Munich to Santiago de Compostela in Spain, which would be, I think, maybe 3,000 kilometers or something like this. And then I also read a book about hiking through Norway, the entire length of Norway, which was quite popular at that time. And I got hooked on the idea as well to hike through Norway. And then, like some of my life-changing moments, I took it like a joke, basically. Oh, it could be nice to walk from Santiago to northern Norway, or maybe even start at the most southern point, Tarifa in Spain, and walk all across through Europe and then ending in northern Norway. So the more I thought about it and the more I told people in my life, the more they were laughing and were like, okay, that sounds maybe a bit crazy, maybe start a bit slower. But then I again got hooked on the idea, and then I started planning, and I just finished my studies in physiotherapy, so I kind of had time to do something bigger. And then instead of going to the US and doing the PCT or something like this, I figured I'd just try it in Europe.
And so, getting the time off wasn't a problem because you hadn't started your career, but how about just getting the money for doing a trip like this?
Yeah, that's always, I think, a big question. For me, I was kind of lucky that I got some money from my grandparents years ago, and I bought a car from the money. And then I said, okay, I will sell the car. I will sell a lot of stuff that I own to make the trip possible, and I tried to make it as cheap as possible. So in the end, I think I spent maybe 9,000 euro in money on the entire trip, which is okay for about a year hiking, I guess. So it worked, but yeah, I was quite lucky to be able to, for sure.
It sounds great. You sold your car to spend a year walking around Europe. A lot of people be like, "What? You sold your car?" But for me, that seems totally reasonable and like a really good course of action. But I think most people must have thought you were crazy when you were doing that.
Yeah, it was kind of weird, but when you think about it in this way, it's really not a lot of money to make an experience in your life that is maybe changing or maybe yeah starting to make you think about life in a different way.
Yeah, totally. And so you started in Tarifa and you ended up in northern Norway. There's a lot of different ways you can get there. Where did your route go through?
As I said, I started in Spain in Tarifa, and I looked before on different maps and different routes that are already existing. And there are those e-trails in Europe. So there are a lot of long distance trails, but not a lot of people actually go them. I think it's more of an idea of them. So I looked into those, and then I looked into the GR routes that are existing, and then I kind of combined stuff that I thought sounds nice or looks nice. I didn't really know where to go in the beginning. I haven't been so much to Spain or France before, so I just talked to some people that did similar stuff, and then I ended up, starting in Tarifa and started to hike through Spain on the GR7, which basically is the E4 as well. And how to say, it didn't start well in a way. I started with high ambitions, and I was not, I would say, mentally prepared for the entire trek. So I had a lot in my mind. It was a lot about calculating in a way how much I have to do in order to get to this point, in order to be at that point at that time of the year. So I did around 35 to 40 kilometers every day, which is, I don't know, 20, 25 miles a day, I guess. And then I got injured after 1 month, basically in Spain, and I had to change the route, and I had to change the idea of that I can do it in a whole, but to skip a part. So I skipped a part in Spain and a part in France. The part in France I did the year after, but the part in Spain is still missing. So I came back on the route in Le Puy in France, and this is also the start of one of the caminos. And then I hiked further north on the also on the Camino. I think it was the Via Gibenensis, the GR65. It's again the same route. So from Le Puy, I went through France to Geneva in Switzerland, and then from Geneva, I also followed the Camino, the Via Jacobi through Switzerland to Constance. And then from Constance, I followed also different caminos, and there's a lot of many different caminos in Germany. So I followed different caminos through Germany to Denmark, and then in Denmark I took the Ox Road through Denmark to the sea, then crossed the sea by boat, and then from there on it was basically almost just through Norway. Some parts in Sweden, some parts in Finland. But the biggest part was through Norway, and in maybe the middle of Norway, I catch the E1 again, which leads all the way up to the North Cape. But southern Norway, I was just looking at Norway is just the best country to hike in general. So there's so many different paths and so many different things you can do. So I kind of picked out the cherries that I wanted to see in and southern Norway, and decided for a route, and then went for it. Changed it a bit during those times, but there are many different trails you can walk.
And so you mentioned you got injured early on. Was that just trying to do too much too quickly, and you just had to take time off?
Yeah, definitely. I had a injury in my shin, so it was definitely that I did too much in the beginning, too fast. I didn't warm up, and I really was not in the trail mentally. I couldn't enjoy it at all in the beginning, which was kind of a bummer after making so many decisions and planning so much for this trip. So I had to stop. I flew back home one day after Christmas, and I felt miserable. I was in a small hotel in the middle of nowhere, and then I decided, okay, there's no way I can walk further. So I flew back home, stayed there for 6 weeks, recovered, and then started up again in France with a total shift in my mentality. After it, there was no pressure anymore. I was just, okay, I will do it more for me now than I thought before. Before it was also maybe a bit about the challenge and doing it for other people maybe as well. I don't know. But after this, I was just, okay, that's just for me now. Nobody cares. I can't do it in one piece anyway. So let's just see how far I can get. And then I actually started to enjoy the trip so much more. So I'd say the injury was bad at that time, but in general, like in hindsight, it was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's incredible sometimes how injuries can impact a trip. Yours is definitely one of the better ones that, you took time off, but it came back and it sounds like it made the trip hugely rewarding. I want to talk a little bit about the logistics of a trip like this, in terms of, what do you do for food? What do you do for sleep? A big thing in this is timing in terms of, seasonality, winter walking versus spring walking versus, more traditional summer or autumn walking. Can you maybe start with just a little bit about walking in Europe in the winter, cold winter months? What do people have to be aware of? Because even in Spain, it can get cold at that time of year.
Yeah, I must admit I totally underestimated it. So when I started in Spain, it was still okay and around 0 degree Celsius, which was totally fine with the equipment I had. I had a double wall tent, I had insulated pants and jacket and everything I needed for those temperatures. But when I started again, it was already February. I started in December, so after my injury, it was February, and I came to France, and it was not so high in the mountains, but still kind of mountains. And I remember that I had almost down to minus 15 degrees Celsius. I don't know what it is in the Fahrenheit, but it was freezing cold, and I barely couldn't sleep in my tent. I was just, yeah, I was not prepared. I have to say, I was not prepared. So I started. It was on the Camino, right? So there are a lot of people going on the Camino, not in winter, but the logistics are kind of the same. So there are a lot of people that are aware of hikers. So I just had some guidebooks that shows notes of people that are supporting the Camino. So I would just go to their places, knocking at their doors, asking like, "Hey, can I maybe please sleep in your place? It's freezing cold. I don't know what to do." And I don't speak French at all. So yeah, it was some interesting encounters and communication skills I had to learn. But I definitely had to change something in my gear, which I did eventually. So you have to be aware that it can be cold and that can be a lot of snow and freezing cold temperatures for sure.
And so you mentioned your first Camino you carried too much. I know you're big into ultralight backpacking now. So what was the gear that you were taking in your pack in winter? Like what are some other things if you want to go ultralight and still go into challenging conditions? What did you add?
I added a thick insulating sleeping pad. I added a bigger down jacket. A better sleeping bag. Before I was using a quilt, like most ultralight hikers, I'd say. But I figured that the quilt at this temperatures doesn't really work for me. And yeah, I changed to a sleeping bag, which was way better at that time. I had a double wall tent that I ditched afterwards to a single wall tarp tent. But for the winter, it was definitely better to get a bit more insulation. Yeah, just thicker clothes in general. And in hindsight, maybe I would also change the trail runners. I was going with trail runners the entire trip, and sometimes it was on the borderline to being too cold or having frostbites on your toes.
One of the challenges I've heard of people who do a lot of winter backpacking or ski touring, where they stay in tents, is just how much darkness there is. And so, is that a challenge when you were in, late autumn or this winter, of just how do you keep yourself amused in a tent for 12 hours or 13 hours a day?
Yeah, there was a problem for sure. Like I was hiking around 8 to 10 hours a day, I'd say, and then I really pushed it. But then I was laying in my tent for hours and hours. So I brought a ebook reader actually. So I was reading quite a lot in this time, and I don't really remember. I like you have connection all the way. So I was also talking to friends, and I started meditating as well in Spain and in France, I think, because just to try something new for me at that point. So just trying out different things to keep you amused or to learn something about yourself.
You stayed in a tent. Were you staying in campgrounds or were you just random camping where you found a nice place along your route?
I was wild camping most of the time, I'd say. It is kind of a gray zone in Europe, so it's definitely better to ask people if you see that that's private ground. But I try to avoid private ground. Like I don't know if I even slept on so much private ground at all. But normally I try to keep to a forest, try to disturb nobody, pitch late or set up the tent late, get up quite early, don't make fire, don't make noise, don't leave trash, like the usual stuff to not disturb anyone. And then it was never a problem for me. I had no bad encounters at all on the entire trip, I'd say.
What are your tips for someone who's never done, wild camping and they're doing a walk in Europe? What are your tips for finding a good campsite?
Oh, that's a good one. For me, I'd say always stick to the forest. That's most of the time a good idea to not encounter anyone that doesn't enjoy you being here. Um, there are some campgrounds. If you stick to the Camino, there are a bunch of different like hostel kind of places where you can stay for uh, yeah, for not so much money. You can stick to those, but for wild camping, it is sometimes kind of tricky. So you really have to consider maybe hiking a bit more in the evening to find a good space, or to talk to people in the towns to get a nice place to sleep.
So you started in December, you took 6 weeks off, restarted in February. How long did it take you to complete the rest of your walk?
I finished on October 3rd. So in general, it was 2 months from start to end. Um, uh, and I think it was 6,500, between 6,500 and 7,000 kilometers in the end. I didn't really count the kilometers at one point. I just went for it.
And you mentioned you really love Norway. And so what made Norway such a spectacular destination for walking?
Um, there are many different reasons, and I was really kind of afraid of Norway in the beginning because it is quite exposed in comparison to other countries in Europe. But you have a lot of great trails you can walk. You have the DNT, the Norwegian Mountain Association, and they are preparing and caring for their treks. You have a lot of cabins that are open for everybody if you're a member of the DNT, so you can get a key for all the cabins. They have over 500 cabins in Norway, so you can stay at so many nice places. In case of an emergency or of bad weather, you can just stay in one of the cabins, and there are maybe often just 20 kilometers between the cabins. Um, it has so much wilderness, nice mountains, especially in the north. It just gets bigger and bigger, and I didn't know that there are areas like this in Europe before. I was just amazed by how, yeah, I don't know, how everything looked. Every day was just special and great, and so much kindness on the way as well. Um, yeah, and it's a huge country, so it took me 4 months to cross it.
Oh wow. You walked in so many different parts of Europe, and I know most people they can't take off almost a year to go and explore, your entire route. But are there places where if someone were to go for a week or two, that really captivated you? That people should go back and check out those specific parts of the journey because they're just so beautiful or special.
Yes, absolutely. I would say the place where I'm living right now, um, in northern Norway, is the best. It's actually the best part to come for hiking. It is there's a trail called Nurkalottleden, and this is I think it's I'm actually not sure. It was part of my hike. Maybe it's 600 or 800 kilometers in total. I don't really know, but it crosses many national parks here in the north, and it's quite remote. But still, you have those cabins of the Mountain Association, and it's just a spectacular nature.
And that kind of leads into how this trip changed your life, which I think is just the coolest part of almost this entire story. And you mentioned earlier, you trained as a physiotherapist, and you're doing something totally different now. Can you maybe share how your life was changed by this trip?
Yeah. On the trail, still on the trail, I was when I was hiking through Norway, I was quite far up north, maybe around, yeah, between Narvik and Tromsø in northern Norway. And then I came to a husky farm, a place where they have 75 dogs. It's called Husky Farm Inset. And I know that the owner was hiking through Norway as well. So if you're hiking through Norway, then you can stay here one night for free. And I knew about the place, so I asked, hey, if it's maybe, is it possible to work here just for 10 days, just to stay here for a bit? Because I was meeting friends further up, but I still had a lot of time. So I asked him, and he said, come here, maybe we can find a way. So I came to the husky farm, and then he let me stay. So I worked for 10 days with 70 dogs. I was not into dog mushing before. I didn't know anything about, or not much about dogs in general, but it was a hell of a time. It was just the best time I could imagine. So when I left, and in hindsight, I also made videos about my hike. So I remember saying to the camera afterwards when I walked away, was like, oh, I always want to reach the North Cape, but now I came here and it feels like my trip is done. I mean, I will walk further, but my trip kind of feels done. That's the place where I wanted to go without knowing it. So I will come back to this place. I don't know when, I don't know why, but I will come back to this place. And 2 days later, the owner was writing me a mail. It was like, hey, it was really fun with you. Did you ever think about becoming a husky farmer? I said, no, absolutely not. I will think about it now. So we kind of kept in touch, and after the trip, he asked me if I want to come back in winter to train the dogs and to work with huskies and to get a bit more into guiding. So I had nothing to lose at that point. I was okay. I will finish my hike. I've done everything I wanted to do, and at this point, it just felt very normal to come back to the place where I felt home at that point. So I said, yes, I will come back. I can do physiotherapy whenever. And I really had the feeling of gaining energy while working here or while working on the husky farm. So I came back for a season. And then after the season in May, he asked me, hey, would you like to come back next year? And I said, yeah, sure. I will come back in September, but I will do some hiking in between. So I hiked for 2 more months. And then I came back to the husky farm and worked here again for, I think, 9 months. And then COVID hit. But at that point, I kind of knew that I wanted to come back. So he asked me if I want to come back the year after, which was not possible at that point because of COVID. So I worked as a physiotherapist in Germany. But they kept asking me if I want to come back. And then my head was kind of set anyway that I want to come back at that point. So that's what I did. After COVID, I came back again. And the owner changed. His son took over the farm, but he was quite fond of the idea of having me in the team as well. And it's a really small family business, so it's just the owners and me basically. And I decided to stay here and kind of move here permanently after the year, after COVID.
which just sounds incredible. And there's one thing, I don't know, can't remember if I watched it or I read it, but you said how being a physiotherapist took so much energy, but this job doesn't take energy, it like creates energy. And from the outside, I would think, having 75 dogs and trying to keep on top of all of that, it's a very physical job. I would think this, job with all the Huskies would take a lot of energy as well. And maybe can you talk why this doesn't take energy for you, and why it is. You're smiling as you're talking about this. You obviously love the dog, you love the environment. This idea of like creating energy even though it's really tough work.
Yeah, I can't really explain, I think, why it is like this. I just felt it when I was here the first time, and it keeps on going the same way. Every time I work here, it's like, don't get me wrong, it's not a job that I'm working here in Sit, but it's more of a lifestyle. In winter season, for sure, I work 7 days a week, and it's sometimes 10, 12, 14 hours of work, because it is a lot of stuff to do. It's 75 dogs, and we work with customers, so we go on multi-day dog sledding trips with those customers into the mountains. It is quite exclusive, and it's really, like, it's still a small family business, so everything here feels like family. Working here is just a really good way to communicate in this place, and then the dogs give so much energy. So with the patients in physiotherapy, they often drain energy from you. I think in most jobs, if you work with people, often it's nice, but they are also draining energy from you. And here I have a different feeling. The dogs are just giving me so much energy. And then if you get into guiding with customers, and it's not about day trips or just showing them the surroundings and they're leaving afterwards, but you're staying with them for a week, or now the next trip I will attend on Monday will be 10 days in the mountains. So you really get in touch with those customers as well, and can teach them about nature and everything that is yeah, I don't know. It's just a really nice way to work, and I think that's why I gain a lot of energy while working here. Why it's of course sometimes draining, and sometimes I'm just done with working. I just want to lay in bed, like it is in every other job as well. But
it's almost a bit like backpacking or through hiking, that it's a lot of effort, but I always find, like, if I go backpacking for a week here in the Canadian Rockies, when I'm done, I actually am really energized mentally. My body's tired, but just not having, phone calls and text messages and emails and all these jobs to do, just having a really simple life, it just creates so much space and freedom for me, that I come back and I feel like I'm ready to take on the world. And people always think, like, how can you feel relaxed after spending a week backpacking with them? I have a massive backpack because I have 3 kids, so I carry all their stuff as well. And they're like, how can you enjoy that? How can you say that's like, makes you feel good? But it sounds a bit like what you experience. It's hard work, but it's work that's really rewarding, and you don't have all the stresses of a regular job with, as a physiotherapist, clients who maybe complain too much or cause trouble or, need a lot of effort.
yeah, that's funny that you say it. I actually never thought about it this way. I think I never compared working here with hiking, but it makes absolutely sense. It's the same kind of energy. It's about life being way slower up here than it is maybe in a different job or in a different city. And it's a lot about just being outside the entire day working, but feeling not drained mentally. Feeling drained physically for sure, but not drained mentally. Yeah.
And I think I grew up spending my summers on a farm, and the body feels good when your body's tired but your brain isn't. We never get that our entire lives. Our brains are tired because we're working office jobs, and our bodies haven't had anything. So I'm sure there's some evolutionary aspect. If we go back thousands of years, that's how you were a good hunter-gatherer or whatever it was. I want to end, you talked a bit about spending your summers doing hiking so you can be a guide in winter, and you've done some pretty incredible walks. Like, if you look at most people's bucket list of stuff they want to do it in terms of kind of long distance hikes, you've done a lot of them. Are there any that, you'd pick out as being super special?
I would say I was hiking the HRP. It's the Pyrenean High Route in 2019. So that's 800 kilometers through the Pyrenees. And for me, that was very special because it's just mountain ranges for days, going up and down, having beautiful views on those mountains. There's not so much people being there, and not so many people hike this route. So if you connect to people that are actually on this route, it was really nice, a nice trail community. So I would say this hike was definitely worth checking out if you want to hike in Europe, and if you want to be in the mountains. It's vast mountains and just an amazing trip.
Yeah, I did the GR10, which is the French, lower version.
Yeah.
Boy, it's over 20 years ago. And what surprised me, I did that before spending a summer in the Alps, is there was nobody doing it. Like, I'd go into gîtes or, campgrounds, and I'd be the only person there. I'm in the middle of summer, and then, you go to the Chamonix Valley, and there's a million people. And I didn't realize how lucky it was. Like, the Pyrenees are kind of, everyone ignores them. And the HRP or the GR11 in Spain, they seem to get way less traffic even than the GR10 does.
Yeah, I think the same way. The Alps are quite busy these days, and I think the GR10 and GR11 are getting more recognition now, which is nice. But the HRP is still kind of, I think it's getting more popular by now as well. But it's still not so many people, and you have so much space, and it's a lot of good food as well, and it was a really good time.
Excellent. Well, thanks for coming on the show today, Alex. It was really great to hear about your walk, but also just hear about, finding this passion and this, source of energy with the Huskies and kind of finding your true calling, which I think a lot of people are looking for. They go on a big trip, maybe they've broken up, or maybe they're just dissatisfied with their life, and to find, kind of your calling is, I think, really inspirational.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. I think sometimes it's easy to change stuff. You just have to try it and have to go for it. And then in the end, you might be surprised how much can change. Just like for me, just the Camino or then the big hike, stuff like this can really change a lot in your life.
Definitely. If people want to learn more about you, find your videos on YouTube, or even find out more about the Husky Farm, where can they find you online?
Online, best is either on Instagram or on YouTube. My name is German, so it's quite hard to find me, but it's Wanderbursche, which means basically the hiking guy. I can send you the link, and the Husky Farm is just Husky Farm Instead or huskyfarm.de. So you can check out the Husky Farm for sure as well. It's a lovely place to visit if you're in the area, and we have a lot of nice trips going on.
Excellent. I'll put the links you mentioned in the show notes, and if people are looking to, explore Europe this summer or next, Alex's videos are really engaging and really fun, and they kind of show all these different places. So it's a great. I started watching. We had a late season snowfall, and so I was inside one week around the fire and just started binging them, and they're really, really engaging. So I'd urge all the listeners to give those a watch if you want to travel vicariously. And with that, thanks for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.